2026. This is the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. Tanya, can you verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Okay. We are now at the opportunity for public comment. Do we have any public speakers this evening?
We do not.
Anyone? No?
Nope.
Okay. Before we start, I just want to kind of give the committee an update. We're going to seek to change around the agenda, but we've got some guest speakers tonight. And just for courteous for them, we're going to move the audit discussion up after vouchers, followed by our discussion on health insurance plan. Seeing no objections, we'll just move forward with that. So the first action item this evening is the approval of the minutes. Are there any questions? Mrs. White?
It's not questions, a couple suggestions. If I should do that before we make a motion to approve and discuss at that point, or
Yeah, go ahead.
make them, okay. First of all, I'm wondering if we should, in the members present, include who our guests are. Then when you're referring back to the agenda, to the minutes of the meeting, you can easily see that Allison is here as part of our group, as well as in the minutes that we're looking at for the 9th of March, that James Murray and Joe Van Giam were, there speaking for that topic. And I say when we have guests here, like just to have them all listed as, guests present, and administration, like for Allison to be part of the team, to be sharing. It's just a suggestion.
Yeah,
For future
Tanya,
reference.
you can take that under advisement.
Yeah.
That's what we'd prefer to do. I don't see any reason why you can't list somebody who guest speaks. I don't think it needs to be any more formally as it comes up on the agenda item itself.
And then I do have one change for the point of transparency. Under the discussion information items, the discussion related to our number 3, policy 7300, disposition of real estate property. It identifies the fact that we agreed that the policy is effective as written, but I think that doesn't give any explanation about the fact that you had done the research on the comparisons of all the other school districts in the area, and I think that is definitely noteworthy in terms of that final decision. And there really was no mention of the discussion of changes that I was presenting. Granted that night they were presented on paper copy, I asked that they be put into board docs for the regular board meeting, and that didn't happen. So for the matter of transparency, I think it's important to note that there were suggestions made to try to protect long-term educational interests, financial stability, and enrollment viability for the district as we consider the sale of public assets. And another part of the proposal that I had made was that the sale of district properties to a private competing school may adversely impact student enrollment, public funding allocations, staffing stability, and program sustainability.
Are you interested in making a recommendation for a motion? I would ask that you do that.
Well, just as a clarification that should have been included in the minutes.
And I guess I disagree on that one. For the context, I think that you're seeking to have your voice and your comments noted within the minutes. But if you want to seek to make a amendment to the motion, or I would ask that you do that.
At this point, there isn't a motion made yet. So I was just suggesting that that'd be something I'd like to see in the minutes.
Would have to be on the table, right? And then a motion to amend them would have to be, in order for it to be in order.
I think the minutes reflect the conversation we discussed, policy 7300.
Yep, agreed.
I was going to ask, I don't recall it being commonplace for us to detail all of the discussion items around things that are discussion items on any of our minutes, unless I'm
It is not.
mistaken.
I'll move to approve the minutes as presented. I think
Second.
that'll at least,
It's been motioned by Dr. Piasek, second by Mr. Wad. Is there any other discussion?
So with the things that I'm suggesting that are just being dismissed.
You can make a motion.
you can make a motion to amend the minutes.
That's
Okay.
Do you have one?
I would like to make a motion to amend the minutes to reflect the discussion that was had under number 3, policy 7300, disposition of real estate property, comparing other school districts' policy in that regard, and identifying that the language included protecting long-term educational interests, financial stability, and enrollment viability of the district.
All right, seeing no second.
I'll move to amend the minutes as follows, that there be a sentence added that says the discussion included recommendation for changes by a board member.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Dr. Piasek, seconded by Mr. Wad. Any further discussion on the amendment presented by Dr. Piasek? Okay, seeing none, Tanya, can you take the roll call? Or,
We could
yes.
just do a voice vote.
This is to.
To add a
amend, to
sentence.
make the
Yes.
amendment. Okay.
Okay, sorry, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no.
No?
So we have a motion for a amended set of minutes right now, I think. Yeah. Would you like to make some other kind of amendment?
I had suggested what I thought the statement should be.
It
and
needs
I
to
should
be
repeat that?
specific, though, so we can document it.
Okay.
Sorry, Carrie.
I move that we include under number 3, policy 7300, disposition of real estate property, discussion related to protecting the long-term educational interests, financial stability, and enrollment viability of the district, as well as the sale of district property to a private competing school may be adversely affect school enrollment, public funding allocations, staffing stability, and program sustainability. And I can give you those, the wording of that.
Or if you want to email it to me too, that
Okay.
would work. Want to do that?
Sure.
She made a motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mrs. Voigt to add language to the meeting minutes. Do I have a second? Okay, seeing none, that motion fails. So the motions now have, or the minutes have passed under the original.
Now we now have to vote to approve that. We amended it. Now we have to approve the amended.
Okay,
Which that motion is still live from the first one. So we have to do that vote.
okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
No?
Okay, passes 4-1. All right, the next action item for this evening is the approval of the vouchers. I understand we did not have any questions this month.
That's correct.
Okay, is there any discussion items, questions?
I just have one question, if I could.
Dr. Piasek?
The total amount of the vouchers was about 2.3 million higher than the previous month. Can you just comment on the differences that we would see in April versus March? I'm sorry, March versus February. My document.
Yeah, I would think that that's just the timing of the payments, of the dates being cut that's causing the shift. But we can follow up with that in a board update or something, or bring it back to next month's meeting, however you want to. I don't have an answer off the top of my head, but I think like I said, I think it's a timing issue.
Okay.
Seeing no other discussion items, I'd be looking for a motion.
Motion to approve the vouchers for March 2026.
Mrs. White?
Second.
All right, motion by Mr. Harlan, second by Mrs. Voigt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All right, passes 5-0. All right, so now we will move into our discussion item on the 2024-2025 audit report.
Yeah, Brad Porter from Lauterbach and Amen is signing in, I believe, is here with us, virtually to present the findings of the 24-25 budget. For those that don't know this, under state statute, a school district is required to have an annual financial audit completed by a third-party partner. So we're here to close out 24-25's financials, and then once the board sees it on Wednesday, we'll post this on the district's website with the management letter so everyone can see. The management letter and the state financial statements are in board docs for you. I gave you all hard copies tonight as well. And we'll turn it over to Brad, and Chris Allison and I are here to answer any questions you might also have on the audit. So, Brad, if you're with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, sure can.
Yeah, we sure can. Wow. Quite an entrance.
All right, bonus. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brad Porter, and I'm here on behalf of Lauterbach and Amen as the principal overseeing the district's financial statement audit process. I will be providing a very brief recap of the documents that we've issued at the conclusion of our fiscal year 2025 reporting cycle, which was finalized a few months back at this point. First and foremost, I really appreciate the opportunity to remote into the meeting here tonight. And before I begin my coverage of the audit documents, I wanted to give an extra special thank you to the district's finance team for all of their efforts and contributions in getting to this point tonight. Though there have been some new faces involved in the audit process, and Allison, I apologize, nothing says welcome to the district like jumping into the audit process right away in July. The underlying theme has remained the same. That is that the district's finance team has always prioritized our audit requests, make sure that we have a seamless line of communication from start to finish throughout the entirety of the audit, and shows a willingness to take the recommendations that we make and implement those as soon as possible, as you'll see here momentarily as I get into the management letter. I'd also like to highlight that it's very apparent from an auditor's perspective that the finance team has created an internal control environment that allows for safeguarding of the district's funds. We had no true internal control related recommendations in our management letter for fiscal year 2025 or prior, and that goes to show just those efforts that I have referenced with regards to the safeguarding of the district's assets. With that said, I'd like to share my screen here this evening and walk you through 4 pieces of required communication that we've issued at the conclusion of our audit. So bear with me as I do that now. All right, can everybody see my screen here? I think I see my Lauterbach and Amen letterhead there and the TV in the background, but just want to make sure the Zoom level is good for everybody.
There.
All right, very good. Well, we'll start with our SAS 114 letter. In accordance with Statement on Auditing Standard number 114, we are required to issue this letter to state whether or not we had any difficulties that we had with management during our audit process or disagreements with management throughout our audit process, which would include things like uncorrected misstatements, etc. And I'm happy to report that in the body of what we call our SAS 114 letter, you will find no such disagreements or difficulties noted for fiscal year 2025. I'd like to then switch to what we call our SAS 115 letter. Under Statement on Auditing Standard number 115, we are required to issue this letter in situations where we have identified what is known as a material weakness or a significant deficiency. Now, this is the first year in which this letter has been issued, and I will certainly seek to provide some clarity and context as to the why here now. I'd like to highlight that a material weakness is considered the more pervasive of the two. We did not have any material weaknesses that we had identified for fiscal year 2025. We did, however, note a significant deficiency in this letter for fiscal year 2025, which was due to a correction of accounts payable liability balances as of the previous fiscal year end, so June 30th, 2024. And I want to highlight that in most cases, these are auditor proposed corrections, and that was not the case for the district situation for fiscal year 2025. your team had approached us with the correction to accounts payable, and it had been a known issue that both parties had sought to work together on to get cleaned up. So I'm happy to report that the accounts payable balances will be jiving with the balances that are ultimately reported in the district's general ledger software moving forward, and that this should be a one-time letter that we would not expect to be repeated in the future. So I commend Allison and Darren for leading the efforts to take care of that accounts payable cleanup for fiscal year 2025. And again, you may see the verbiage restatement throughout your audit process. And this is considered a retroactive application where we applied that journal entry and that adjusting journal entry to the previous fiscal year. Now, moving on to our annual financial report, there are 87 pages to this PDF document, so I promise we won't go through each page here tonight, but I would like to provide a brief recap of some of the intangibles of our audit process. I know that you are receiving monthly financial reporting that is much more current than June of 2025, so though I will talk through a couple financial highlights, I'd like to keep most of my time and energy on some of the intangibles, as I had mentioned. So I'd like to draw everybody's attention to page 1. Page 1 is what we call our independent auditor's report. The primary purpose of this document here is to not only state what your responsibility is as management, and that is ultimately to provide us as auditors with a clean set of financial statements. We go on to state what our responsibility is as your audit firm, and that is to generate an opinion on the financial statements that have been provided to us. And I'm happy to report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2025, we have issued what is known as an unmodified opinion, which is the cleanest form of opinion that any entity in the government space can ultimately receive. So congratulations to the district. What an unmodified opinion states is that we as your auditors believe the financial statements are presented fairly in all material aspects, and that there are sound internal controls in place over the financial reporting function. I'd next like to highlight what we call our management's discussion and analysis, which begins on page 5. Pages 5 through 12, we call it our MD&A for short. I would highly encourage you as a committee and as a board to spend most of your time and energy analyzing our audit with this set of 8 pages or so, and you're going to walk away with a great narrative overview of fiscal year 2025. There's a lot of great comparative information, charts, graphs, things that are a little bit easier to understand in the financial statements sometimes. So nothing specifically I wanted to point out with this section, but I did want to at least encourage the board to spend most of their time in here, and I think you'll find it a very beneficial section of your audit document. Now we'll move on to page 20, which is our statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for our governmental funds. That is a fancy GASB term for our income statement. And I'd like to specifically focus our energy on the far left column for our general fund for the fiscal year. Now I've highlighted midway through the page a line item called excess or deficiency of revenues over or under expenditures. This can be best looked at as sort of our operating income for the fiscal year. So for the general fund, we had $21.47 million increase in operating income for the year before transferring out $22.6 million to our special education and other funds, ending the year with about a just over a $1.07 million decrease in our overall general funds fund balance, which for reference, the district has about 4 months of operating expenditures in our unassigned fund balance, which I feel like is a relatively healthy target to strive for. And I did want to also point out, as we are preparing for this meeting, fiscal year 2026, my understanding is that it will be the first year in which the district is actually debt-free. And Darren, feel free to confirm nothing has changed from the last time we talked, but that's quite an accomplishment for the district as well.
Yeah, so if you really are digging into the financials, I think it's page 70, it still shows our amortization. So this is fiscal year 24-25, so next year's audit. I'm assuming that just disappears unless you have to show historical transactions or something like that, but
Yep.
but it's true. We are debt-free as of April 1st.
Very good. Now, the last section of our audit document that I wanted to point out begins on page 64. I know oftentimes boards would like to see how we perform in relation to budget. There are a plethora of budgetary schedules beginning on page 64 where you can see the line item and the function level. So just wanted to point this out to the board's attention here tonight. No need to cover it in more detail tonight, but that section does exist and can be found on page 64. Now, I'd like to get into our management letter. The primary purpose of our management letter is going to be to communicate any best practices that we see across some of our other school district clients, any internal control best practices or weaknesses that we've identified, as well as any upcoming GASB or accounting pronouncements that could have an effect on the district's financial statements.
Brad, can I just,
Now, I want to make sure it's,
Brad, can
sorry,
I
what
just
was
jump
that?
in? The management letter is one of the separate inserts in the financial statements, just so we're all on the same page. Thanks. Sorry, Brad.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Darren. It's very important to reiterate that none of the comments that are found within our management letter affect our opinion. As I have previously communicated, we have issued an unmodified, clean opinion on the district's financial statements. But as auditors, our job is not just to provide an opinion, right? It's to provide value outside the scope of that opinion. And this management letter is a great means of doing so. We had 2 current recommendations for fiscal year 2025, one of which is not necessarily a recommendation, it's more of an FYI. So I'll zoom in a little bit here, but this first current recommendation relates to IT security awareness and monitoring of emerging risks. We have unfortunately had far too many clients of ours fall victim to cyber-related crime. So this comment here, as I had mentioned, is more of an FYI to boards and the committee that these risks are very real in this world. And it's very important that we're continuing to stress the importance of supporting a safe and secure IT environment. So this comment is not to say that the district isn't already up to par on IT controls. In fact, if there was any true recommendation or weaknesses, that would have been identified separately, but more so in the spirit of making sure we continue to support those efforts. The second current recommendation is minor in nature. I don't want to, downplay it by any means, but the community service fund ended with a deficit fund balance of $8,500 for fiscal year 2025. We'd like to believe this is largely due to the timing of year-end expenditures and that revenue source that's intended to offset those expenses coming in after fiscal year end. So in communications with Darren and Allison, it sounds as though this will be an issue that is cleaned up in fiscal year 2026. Nothing, additional to stress on this front.
Yeah, I'll just add to that one. Normally, we try not to accumulate a fund balance in Fund 80. To me, that's not the purpose of Fund 80, so we oftentimes spend it down very close to the very bottom, and then we had a late transaction that hit, and by the time it hit, our options for rectifying it were very small, but we've never had this. We've gotten close, but that's by design, but we've never gone over. So this will be corrected in the current fiscal year or the next financial statements.
Yep. Thanks, Darren. And in terms of prior recommendations, this is where my job gets a little bit easier, right? We had 4 prior recommendations that we had issued in fiscal year 24 or prior. 3 of which you'll find in the status paragraphs have all been implemented in fiscal year 2025. So I commend the district staff. And as I had mentioned in my introduction, it's very apparent that when we make a recommendation, the district takes that recommendation very seriously and makes sure to remedy that right away. And I think this further justifies that comment. So we had comments for commingled cash, capital asset policy, and outstanding check write-off policy. I'm not going to go into detail on all of them because ultimately they have all been remedied for the current year. The only prior recommendation that exists in this management letter that was not necessarily remedied, and I use that term kind of loosely, was our funds over budget. So each year we assess how our funds operated in relation to what the district had budgeted. And we had 3 funds in 2025 that had exceeded their district generated budget for fiscal year 25. So those things can obviously happen. We have unexpected, not only expenditures, but we could have unexpected revenues that come in that then help to offset those. So I don't certainly want to dwell on that here tonight. I just wanted to make sure we drew attention to those 3 funds that had exceeded their budget for fiscal year 2025.
Yeah, and I'll comment on those really quickly too. In
Sure.
special education, obviously, our costs associated with special education continue to excel at a pretty steady rate. There's two two thoughts to this one, I guess, in my mind. One, I could come back with a budget amendment and have it adjust the numbers, so when we look back on history, everything looks like I nailed the budget perfectly. I actually prefer to leave it in this. I don't mind the recommendation from the auditors in any way, but when I go to budget the next year, I like knowing what my thought process was in the development of that budget, not that I can clean it up at the end of the year. So that's part of the thoughts. But in special education, obviously, we strive to meet the needs of the student. The donations, the Fund 21, we don't know what student groups are planning and when the cash flow of those funds really are going to occur, because they're all school, student club driven, so that one's really hard to hit. And then community services, I said we had a bill hit late. So those are the three that occurred this year, but those aren't excuses. I'm just giving you the backstory.
No, but I want to clarify something on that. So when we're talking about you setting a budget and your actuals, every business, every corporation, and every district in the state sets a budget. The actuals come in, and there is a variance plus or minus as to how the fund perform, how the expense perform. This is not an anomaly. These are variances to
No.
budget that fell outside of that, which is the normal cadence that every business and every district walks through. So having a variance to fund into budget, I expect that. And if you're going to do the fund allocation and true it up, to your point, Mr. Clark, you're missing the understanding of what's happening at the ebbs and flows of our revenues and expenses.
And again, as Brad mentioned, sometimes there's a revenue side that offsets the distance between your budget and the actuals on the expenditure side. So I don't see this as, Carrie, I think you and I are on the same page when it comes to this. I'd rather have that document be true to what we were thinking at the time.
Correct.
But the other three.
Yep, and
have been
I
fully
was just going to
corrected.
add, the intent is obviously to use those overages to help spearhead efforts when setting the next year's budget and making sure that you're incorporating, historical experience in that equation, which I have all the confidence the district is. So, as I mentioned, it's more of an FYI.
Can I ask a question about that? With the recommendation from last year, and then the knowledge that we will consistently have this movement, and I think especially in our special education and possibly also in the community service, just because of how those pieces come in. Is the recommendation to have a process to review those, or is it to do something formally? Like, what is the audit process recommending that we do? Note them?
Yeah,
or
it's more of
respond to them?
just making sure that we have an awareness of the overages that did exist from fiscal year 2025 when setting our 26, 27, and beyond budgets. 26 is obviously tough from a timing, right? You're still working on the audit when 26 is live, so it's just trying to be proactive in getting ahead of some of those unforeseen things that happen in fiscal year 25. And, if we expect some of those similar situations to exist in a future year, just to have an awareness that those events occurred.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we can keep going, Brad. Did we lose him?
Oh,
Oh, no, sorry, I'm still here.
okay.
I didn't know if there was any additional questions.
Not on the recommendations.
Very good. Well, that concludes my coverage of the management letter and the audit process, and I would be happy to open it up for any additional questions. I just wanted to also highlight that we did recently issue, in accordance with the March 31st deadline, the schedule of federal expenditures that is required to be submitted for the district's single audit. So that information also can be obtained from Darren and Allison for your records. So,
Mrs. White?
I have just one thing that I bring up every year that I'd like to make sure to clarify my interpretation of what you're saying on page 20, where the discussion is related to the special education funding in and out, how much has to come from our general fund to offset the total mandated expenses that have been incurred. As I see this, what amount would I say that we were not reimbursed for, that we had to transfer from general fund to be able to cover?
The 22.6.
So the transfer from general fund to special education fund was $22.6 million for the fiscal year.
They just clarify that when I first got on the board, it was like 16 million, and it just keeps going up and up and up over the last
Yes, yep.
8 years.
Yeah, and just for reference, you'll notice on the bottom of page 20 that special education is showing a zero fund balance. That is by design. That fund cannot actually report a fund balance. So the transfer from general ends up being whatever is needed to ultimately get that fund's fund balance reporting as zero to recoup the expenses. So
Okay, thank you. Just a clarification to make sure I was interpreting it correctly.
Yeah, when they created Fund 27, I wasn't a fan of it, but once you realize how nice it is to quickly reference the transfer amount as our commitment to special education. Now granted, when they did it, special education wasn't as costly as it is today, but I do think it serves an important role.
Thank you.
The only call out that I wanted to highlight, again, which I do the same thing, is, Brad, on what page can you tell me the number and where it was that it was 4.5 months of operating expenses?
That was pretty.
sorry, you broke up there just a little bit. I think the question was where would you generate the number of months of operating expenditures from?
I wanted the number that we had talked about that says this is 4.5 months worth of operating expenses.
Yes, yep. So what we would do, we'd take the total expenditures from page 20 in our general fund, which was $143 million for the fiscal year. We would divide that by 12 to get our monthly operating expenditures. And then we would take our unassigned fund balance from page 18, which is $47.6 million, and we would divide that by our monthly operating total.
Okay, and that amount is?
I can get you the exact number. I think it was approximately 4 months. Sorry, I don't have the decimal points available. When I was prepping for the meeting, I just wrote down 4.
Darren, do you have that?
Oh, I can get it for you if
Yeah,
you'd like the decimals.
We had talked about this, and there's a reason that I want to highlight how significant for people to understand what it costs us to run our district, especially in times when we're
Yeah.
going through a lot of different things. It's really important that that's a cap.
It is 3.99, so I was right. I was right on with the 4.
Yep. That's right.
Okay, I don't think, the dollar amount,
Oh, I'm sorry. Just shy of 12 million.
okay? So
Yep.
4 months is about $12 million, and the reason that's relative is when we start to talk about
No, it's 12 million a month,
12 million a month.
right?
Yep. It would be 47,697,000.
Okay,
Would be the 4-month total.
So roughly 48 million to operate for 4 months.
Correct, just
Okay, and
our general
The
fund.
point on this is, when we look to the community talking about the structural deficit, or why are we selling, or why are we doing, the reasons to take a look at how much it costs to run the district as the way it stands is significant. And in some of these cases, doing a sale or even pose of the land and what piece don't even cover the gap. So I think these are really important numbers for our community to understand as to what it does truly take for us to operate, and decisions that we have to make sure that we're doing everything to support, number one, our students and education. Are there any other questions or thoughts for Brad?
Otherwise, don't blink because I will be back in a few months.
I look forward to it.
But his staff was great to work with, and they're a resource throughout the year. Allison and I have set meetings as we get closer to this year end, just to kind of, since it'll be Allison, first year closing out the financial year, just kind of go through the things to look for, maybe run some journal entries by them, like the payout of all of our debt and all those types of things. So they're always a call away, which is nice throughout the year.
Yeah, and Brad, I appreciate you and your team, as well as Darren. Allison, welcome aboard. The work is already paying off to close out with another year with a clean audit, which is the best that we could ask for.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's it, Brad. Thank you for your time. We will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Any questions come up after the fact, just let me know. I know Darren and Allison know how to get a hold of me, so take care, everybody.
All right,
Sounds
thanks,
good.
Brad.
Thank you.
Bye.
Mr. Webb?
I do have a question for Mr. Clark. So regarding the fund balance total, do we have a historical record of what that number has been, as well as like the number of months of operating expense we've typically had on hand at the end of each one of our fiscal years? I'd be curious to see if that's
We do.
increasing, decreasing.
We would have that, I think we could pretty easily calculate that number of months.
Yeah.
Sorry, we can get those numbers for you. It would just take some time to calculate the number of months of operational longevity we get out of fund balance. I can tell you in the late 90s, the fund balance was $323,000. That's how low it's been, and maybe with everything that happened in 2008, it might have even been lower at that time with the investments and all those types of things. So, but we can certainly provide several years of that information pretty handily, I would think.
And I'll just kind of reiterate why I'm curious. So, one of the things that I think gets potentially overlooked or isn't understood within the community is we keep this fund balance, right? And we try to keep it at a target that, what is it, typically around 4 months? Is that our typical target?
It's funny, until we met with the auditors prepping for this meeting, I've never really looked at it in terms of a monthly.
Yeah, it's usually a
Or as a
percentage of
percentage
operating.
or as a percentage of
It's a
the,
percentage of
Yeah,
operating.
normally we talk about, I like being around 20%.
which is
We have
1/5.
policy that dictates that.
Yeah. So the reason I ask this is I'm just wondering if we're seeing over time a decrease in the amount of cushion we have in that fund balance, which also would speak to the importance of ensuring that we're getting the inefficiencies out of our system so that we can continue to maintain a healthy fund balance. Because if we're pouring money into say, half-empty buildings, or 40% empty buildings, that's money that can't be used on services, and if those services are still gonna be funded, it's the general fund that those funds are gonna come out of. So I'd like to see what that looks like, and I think that's something that would be interesting for this committee to continue to look at going forward, as we're going through the OOF process, to see year over year, how much efficiencies we gain back and how well we protected the general fund.
I agree.
And we have in the past targeted some projects with fund balance, but those have been budgeted. We adopted a deficit budget knowing we would spend fund balance for, I believe, the Phase 3 projects, the South work at South and the auditoriums and things like that. So some of that data will have some of that in there too.
Sure.
So,
And I recall us making some of those decisions, right? We made a conscious decision because we felt the fund balance was in a healthy spot to be able to take those dollars and direct them to
Correct.
operational expenses that we felt were critical for the district. I understand that. I guess I'm more concerned about having to close any structural deficit as a result of or structural deficits that result at the end of the year, as opposed to conscious decisions made by the board to spend money on things. I don't want us to hoard money, obviously, that's not the correct approach either.
Any other final questions on the annual audit? Okay, seeing none, our next item tonight is a discussion and possible action on the 2026-2027 health insurance plan, and I believe we're going to start with a speaker to talk about our RX.
yeah, Dennis from Prism is here if you guys want to come up, and then Kristen Morose is our benefits coordinator. Kind of a two-phase conversation tonight. We wanted to, we were going to originally have this report last month, but our schedules fell through. Talk about our recently completed RFP for PBM services,
PBM.
prescription benefit pharmacy. Yeah, you say PBM so much is all you think about. That process, because it does tie into the data that we use to project out what our renewals will look like for the 26-27 school year. But then once that's completed and we answer all your questions, I want to walk through a recommendation that the administration is making for a health insurance plan design change, and kind of give you some background data on our self-insured program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dennis, and Kristen and I are here to answer any questions as we go along through that. Are you?
I actually thought you guys were presenting and I was answering questions. No, I'm kidding. So Dennis Busk with the Prism Health Group. As Darren said, we are your pharmacy consultant, so we work alongside Acrisure, who is your health and benefits broker, to manage costs and trends for the school district. So we'll touch on a few different things. I thought it'd be really good to give you some background on PBMs and pharmacy as a whole. I've been doing this 20 years. It has changed drastically. Kristen and I were actually joking, like back in 2008, that was like the first big thing where, pharmacy benefits were really impacted, and it's changed considerably since then. It's even more rapid fire now in the last 2 years than it probably was the previous 18 that I've been doing this. So it's really interesting in that regard. We'll talk about the renewal and the RFP process that we went through, and then we'll talk about what's next in pharmacy as well, because there are a lot of things that are impacting the pharmacy landscape. Pretty much every day, Trump is saying something related to pharmacy. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but it's all going to have an impact on you and your overall spend. So we can start on the next slide here. So I just thought this would be good for you guys to showcase where the pharmacy benefit space was back in the 60s when it was first created to where it is today. There's a lot more involved with a PBM, so a pharmacy benefit manager, now than there was when this first started. And so, I don't know, I just think people give the PBMs a bad rap, but they do a lot. If they weren't in existence today, I actually believe that your pharmacy costs would be even greater because there wouldn't be a gatekeeper. So you'd essentially be relying on a physician or a pharmacy. The PBM's kind of the intermediary. So they do some bad things as well, which we can touch on some of those and why there's some more scrutiny from the government as of recent. But they also do a lot of good work as well. We can move to the next slide. So this just talks about kind of how many PBMs are in existence today. So there's 60 to 75 PBMs that are operating today. We as a company work with just over 40. Which is at a large amount. The marketplace is dominated by the big three, which is CVS, Express Scripts, and Optum. You're fortunately, for those many of you probably know, you're not with any of those. They're actually under even more scrutiny than anyone else. You're with Navitus today. But the market is kind of pinpointed by those three, and other smaller PBMs, which we'll touch on here on the next slide, are actually gaining a lot of market share and traction because they are doing things a little bit differently than maybe how the big three have operated for a long time. Move to the next slide. So this just highlights kind of, again, the big three, so the big primary players, the ones that kind of maintain most of the market share. The secondary market, which is where your PBM lies, Navitus, along with some others, so Prime Therapeutics, MedImpact, Maxer, Vital One, they just went through a name change, 1-1. And then what we call like the tertiary market, and those are some of the smaller PBMs that are gaining traction in the marketplace. Rightway has probably been the fastest growing PBM that we've seen in quite some time. CapRx is also, Capital RX has been gaining some traction too. What we're, I think, going to start seeing is you're going to see kind of a large conglomerate of secondary players. So instead of having really small players, really large players, there's going to be a big market. Who knows? Heaven forbid the government may get involved and there may be no PBMs anymore. I think we're a long ways from that. But at least my spidey senses say everybody will kind of be in that middle, which is good because then it creates real competition. And in this business, it really comes down to size and scale. And the reason those big three players have become so prevalent is that they own the market share. So they have the amount of lives, they have the amount of scripts, and ultimately that drives pricing. And so if you go to another market or another PBM, you're not able to get as good a rates. So we'll talk about why you're with Navitus and why you're going to stay with Navitus too here in a little bit. But it's a very tough market when you're competing against those big three. The other thing that's happening in the marketplace is a lot of M&A. So a lot of activity around PBMs buying up other PBMs, and mainly it's the big three. So they're not necessarily gaining new business through winning business, what they're doing is buying other companies, and that essentially continues their growth. Very surprising, in the last 5 to 10 years, how many of these things have happened. I was actually at Express Scripts when they purchased Medco. Medco is actually the largest or second largest PBM, bought by the first largest PBM. Weird that even went through in the first place, but it did, and it's kind of continued to happen in the marketplace. It started to slow down a little bit. I think M&As in general have started to slow down, especially in our marketplace, but knock on wood, because as soon as I say that, then there'll be one tomorrow. But we haven't seen anything, at least as of recent. But all this stuff impacts your bottom line and how much your members pay, and then how much you pay after your members pay for their prescriptions as well. So I thought it'd be interesting, in kind of going from where we were, kind of where the marketplace is, to your spend in general. And we don't have to spend a ton of time, but looking at your plan from 21, 22 to the present, and what I did is annualized, the present year. But you've seen basically a $6 million increase in 5 years. So we're looking at $1 million every single year that you're increasing in cost. You haven't really changed in terms of membership. In a way, you've maybe even declined in some cases, but your costs continue to go up. So pharmacy costs aren't getting any cheaper. Medical costs in general aren't getting any cheaper either. So how can you mitigate some of that spend? And that's how we got involved, and kind of a perfect segue or pivot point into what we're going to talk about next, but how we got involved with the school district in the first place is to help curb some of that.
And I would just add to that, the PRISM has a different view, because we audit our claims and stuff like that, but we've done the same thing on the pharmaceutical or RX side of it, but I've never had a company come in and really look at our contract and try to drive the best written contract like PRISM brought. I think that was the differentiator from you and other consultants that we worked with over the years is, and we'll talk about that with the RFP. The RFP was actually a two-step process. The first one to get out of the last year of our old contract to free up the RFP that was just completed. And I'm sure you'll touch on that, but I wanted to make sure to mention it.
Yep. Yeah, it's not an easy process. Like I said, I've been doing this 20 years. People try to hide a lot of things in contracts. Like, I'll tell you a quick pivot story. We just had this happen last week where we had renewed a contract with a client, or with a client, a PBM. PBM sends over the contract. I start looking through it. Like, well, that's weird. I don't see that anywhere. And it was a $5 per claim charge. So per claim is a formulary management fee. So I looked in all of our RFP documents. I'm like, well, maybe I missed it. I'll blame myself first. Didn't see it anywhere. Go back and I said, well, that's just how we're putting that into all of our contracts because we're now passing back 100% of rebates. Well, that wasn't negotiated. And so we're kind of in a fight, and this isn't with your plan in particular, but those are all things that happen all the time. And if you don't have somebody watching, the hen house, that will happen. And you don't really have a lot of power, which is the tough part. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of fiduciary responsibility. The PBMs don't have any responsibility at all, at least today. That is changing, but they have no responsibility. The fiduciary responsibility falls on you as a plan sponsor, sadly. So that's where we come in and we can really help with that. I thought it'd be interesting to touch just a little bit on the kind of timeline of events, because we've had a lot of stuff happen in a relatively short amount of time. So we actually presented what we call a PPD. It's a pharmacy program diagnostic. What we do is kind of look in the contract and in the financials of what you had in place and kind of tell you where maybe there are some areas for improvement. And so we presented that, a little bit, a week later, you guys made the decision to partner with us. And then we actually started working on renewing the contract a little bit early, pretty much right away. So within a couple of weeks, right after we turned to the new year. And then within a month or so of that, we finalized the renewal, which is, pretty impressive. And we'll talk through the savings there. The one thing I want to kind of just chat about really quickly is when you think about renewing, it sounds really simple as, hey, they just present a new document, we validate the savings. The problem is a lot of times the PBMs aren't willing to forego all of their savings because it eats into their profit. So we kind of went through a two-step process. One, just renewing the contract because of the time frame. It's usually a 90-day process to do an RFP. And then what we were looking to do is doing a full-blown RFP for the following year, which is the current plan year. And there's more savings when you see additional competition in the space. You can move to the next slide. So This is the PPD that we presented initially, and I'll just touch on the savings. So what we thought we could achieve was around $573,000 in savings over the current contract. The reason I wanted to bring this to your attention is show you what we thought we could save, what we actually saved, and then what the RFP found, which is much closer and in some cases even exceeds that number. Again, competition breeds more savings. So this is the renewal savings. Like I said, we anticipated over 500. It came in around 146,000. So around 4% in terms of savings, 3.4. Typically, pharmacy contracts are 3-year deals. So if you look at that from a 3-year perspective, a little bit over $1 million in savings and around 7.6%. So we'll say 7.5 or 8% in terms of total savings. Again, that's with no competition at all. So that's just saying, hey, we know what the market will bear. So I mentioned earlier, we work with 40 or so PBMs. We know all the contracts. I work with, I don't know, maybe it's 10 or 12 myself. So I know what the market will bear for a client of your size, similar type claims. And I can say, hey, Navitus, which I've worked with some of those folks in the past as well, and say, hey, you're falling short in these 3 or 4 areas. Let's try to improve those and ultimately get you a little bit of a better deal, at least up front. So we're pretty successful there, but when you see the next result of the more full-blown RFP, the results are even more substantial. I won't go into a ton of detail on the timeline. I mentioned earlier it's a 90-day process kind of from start to finish. So we kicked it off in October and then finish somewhere in, I guess that was the end of January, so not too long ago, which seems crazy that we're already in April. And then if you move on to there are 2 slides from here, we'll kind of go into the financials. And we went through 3 different variations of a RFP. So initially, what we typically do is we do the incumbent, so Navitus is the incumbent, and then we looked at 3 additional vendors, so Vital One and Maxer, ServURx, and then Welldyne. Vital One and ServU both have an international sourcing program, so they can buy drugs from Canada and source them to your members. Usually there's some significant cost savings as a result of that. So what we did essentially is looked at 2 vendors that are very similar in Navitus and Welldyne, and then compared those to 2 vendors that have an international type program. Initial savings, when you look at the deals, not a ton of savings in the traditional sense. The reason you don't see a ton of savings on the top line there is because a lot of those drugs move over to international, and we estimate those savings kind of on the bottom. But overall, kind of in that first wave, we saw around 14.5% for ServU, which is over $1 million, so 1.8 million. Vital One is a little bit over 500, and then Navitus was a little over 400. If you remember when I talked about the PPD, it was over 500,000. So that's kind of that target number that we were looking for. Again, that's just round 1. So once we get those numbers back, our job is to, one, we kind of eliminated Welldyne. Their pricing wasn't super competitive. And sometimes that happens just based on drug mix. The pricing doesn't look competitive. And what we did is ruled those out. So what we were doing now when we moved to round 2 is comparing Navitus to a Vital One and ServU. So really a very transparent PBM through Navitus, and then comparing that to 2 vendors that have international sourcing. So we're going to look at the kind of the bottom line again. Your savings for Navitus around 272,000, so about 7%, whereas Vital One and ServU both come in significantly higher, around 700 and then 600,000, so roughly 18% of your total spend and then 15%. So yet again, kind of use that competition. We did a finalist meeting, so we had all the vendors come back out in person. We asked them for kind of another round, so really turn up the heat a little bit in terms of pricing and see what else we could get with regards to financials. So we could meet them all in person. We've obviously met Navitus before because we work with them. It gives the school district a chance to meet Vital One and ServU. Because I always like to think about it as, it's like a marriage. I don't pick a PBM based on, I want to date somebody for the next year. We don't want you to continue to pick a new PBM every year. We want you to find a long-term partner that really is going to be a partner and is evolving with the times. As I said, the market is continually changing, and we need to make sure that you have a partner that is readily available to do that. One of the things with international sourcing, there's been a lot of scrutiny around where drugs are sourced. That's kind of one pain point. There's also a little bit of scrutiny around the tariffs, so drugs coming into the country, potentially leading to higher costs. And then the third piece is that with the advent of biosimilars and some other, lower cost options like a Mark Cuban Cost Plus, there are more options to get drugs more domestically that potentially erode some of that savings internationally. So we're kind of balancing all that and trying to almost predict what's going to happen over the next year to two as we're making this decision as well. Because again, we don't want to make a decision and then a year later you're making a decision to go somewhere else again. And then that's disruptive to your members. So move on to the next slide, which is round 3. And this is kind of where we ended up finishing out our financials. So again, kind of looking at the bottom, you will notice that Navitus, again, not the highest in terms of savings. The big thing is quantifying how much it means or how much it costs to move PBM, so move all of your members to a different entity. It's not easy. It's not just turnkey, flip a switch, and you ultimately can fill a prescription somewhere else. There is disruption. Everybody has a different formulary, at least of some sorts. Everyone has a different network of sorts, so there's disruption. But where Navitus came in is around $462,000 in terms of total savings, so around 12%. Which is a really good number. I mean, anything to me above 10% is a win. Whereas Vital One and ServU both came in 665, 666, and then for 488 or 89,000, but 17% and 12% respectively in terms of savings. So ultimately, we decided to stay with Navitus. The biggest reason is there is some uncertainty with the international, and when you have international, the contract that exists on the PBM side, so because the PBM exists and the international, they are slightly separated, even though they're partnered together, they are two separate entities. So if that international sourcing goes away, the contract isn't as good. So meaning if you're filling, let's just say a Humira prescription internationally, and now all of a sudden you move it into the PBM, the pricing isn't as good. So now your costs and your members' costs go up. So we're trying to kind of navigate and protect against that as we don't know what's going to happen with the government. And there was actually a note on tariffs that just came out, I think it was on Thursday, just before Easter, from Trump, basically doubling down on the tariffs on drugs coming into the country, which ultimately could impact. So very good move, I think, on our part to at least think about that. If that goes away or changes, if a Republican or Trump is no longer in office, then the playing field may change, and then we can pivot as a result of that. But Navitus has been a really good partner. Again, they're very transparent. They're doing a lot of really cool things with biosimilars, which are game changers. For those who don't know what a biosimilar is, it's the biologic equivalent of a brand name drug. Typically, specialty drugs don't lose patent because they just have new indications, and so they continue to be a high cost. The way a biosimilar works is it's like a generic that comes to market for a high-cost specialty drug. And just as an example, the biosimilar for Humira is around $1,000 or less, whereas the Humira product is $5,000. The Stelara biosimilar that's on the market, Mark Cuban, sells that product for $500. It's $40,000 a month. Very big difference in terms of price. So acts more like a generic, which ultimately leads to savings for you. So I covered a lot in terms of financials and what we went through. I mean, obviously there was a lot more to this than kind of what I talked about, but any questions on the financials? And then I'll switch gears into what's next and then what will impact your financials kind of moving forward and all the things that we're looking to monitor and then, pivot, more proactively as they come to light. I have about 4 more hours of content, so I hope you guys are ready. I'm kidding. Go ahead, Derek.
I think this is a good time to touch on how Vital One's a different structure, the traditional PBM versus the path-through, because I do think that's important. When you look at the financials, it might look like, well, there was a clear path, but it wasn't as clear as it
Yeah, if you go to slide 21, just go a couple more slides. One more. So this actually, I'll touch on this really quickly first. So what Darren's talking about is the difference between a transparent PBM and the pricing model for transparent is you're going to pass back all of your discounts, all of your rebates, whatever the dispensing fee that the pharmacy charges, that all gets passed back to the employer. Not all PBMs operate in a transparent setting. Now they will undoubtedly have to move to that setting at some point here within the next couple of years. But the way the models are structured today is you simply have a pass-through model, so transparent, which is not truly transparent for a lot of PBMs. It is with Navitus. And then you have a kind of a spread or traditional type model. And that's what the Vital One and Maxer deal was, is more of a traditional type model. So it's a spread pricing arrangement where you're carving your drugs out to an international sourcing vendor called ArrowRx, and then the rest of it filters through the PBM through Vital One. Now, I've done this 20 years. Typically, a transparent offering and a pass-through offer, or a more traditional offering, they should be the same thing. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you're either going to get charged an admin fee or they bake in the admin fee into your cost. So they're relatively similar. The problem is PBMs got greedy over time and they realized they could make even more money from these different entities. So, if they make money from a rebate, or they make money from, overinflating the admin fee, or charging an egregious fee on a prior authorization, for instance. Those are all different ways to make money, and those are all things that we're looking to minimize. We're not here, saying a PBM shouldn't make money. They're going to make something. Like, they're obviously doing something for you, but how much money is enough money? That's really the key. And so we're looking for all these PBMs to do more of a full transparent offering. You have simply just an admin fee, and then they get paid, based on that. Which makes a lot more sense. But the marketplace, like I said, is just shifting, dynamically, more than I've ever seen it. And you may have seen maybe a month or so ago, Cigna actually came out and said where they're going to move to a fully rebate-free model in 2028, I think it was. Well, the reason they did that is they had an FTC settlement. They were getting sued, and that FTC settlement came out a month earlier. They were just basically trying to give themselves some good press. But the FTC settlement basically said they had to go away and do from that model and basically pass back all the rebates, which they were keeping. For other things that people don't know is a lot of the PBMs now have a rebate aggregator, which is overseas. Though that Trump is basically forcing those aggregators to be in the U.S. because then they can be audited. As it stands today, if they're overseas, many in Switzerland, they have laws against what you can do via audit. So they've created sort of a shell game to make money off of you, which unfortunately is not the right thing to do. It's just the way that the business has been structured. So hopefully we'll see a sea change. Again, I think back like 20 years ago, I always wondered, like, well, why doesn't everybody just pass everything back? It makes the most sense. And I feel like we've gotten even further away from that. But again, that's where the government scrutiny comes in. I just want to move back one more slide to... There you go. So I touched on a couple of these things, I guess, already, but with regards to biosimilars, so this is just stuff that's going to impact just your overall costs. So biosimilars, as more come to market, that's a good thing for you. Navitus has been a really key driver in terms of biosimilar strategy. So as more of these come to market, you'll see some savings as a result of that. There are some PBMs that still don't have a biosimilar strategy. I'll name one, CVS, who is one of the big three. They have a company that makes biosimilars. They do not have a Stelara biosimilar on the market today. Stelara biosimilar came out almost a year ago. Well, the reason they don't do that is they make a considerable amount of money off of the rebate of the branded product, and they have a copay solutions product that they make 25% shared savings. So they are financially incentivized to prescribe or not, to fill a more costly drug, which undoubtedly is what the plan pays. So if you were with CVS, that would be something that I would move you away from pretty much instantly. Then if we move on to the last slide, this just touches on a couple of things, that one there, yeah. Just kind of forces reshaping the landscape. So fiduciary responsibility, like I touched on earlier, all the PBMs are going to have some fiduciary responsibility. I don't know how they've gotten this far from 1968 until now, and they have zero fiduciary responsibility. Like, they should have some skin in the game, and unfortunately they do not. There's more, regulations and control with regards to pricing. You've probably seen or heard about Trump RX, which is the direct-to-consumer option, that Trump is kind of coming up with, or has come up with. That actually was highlighted in the announcement on Thursday with regards to the drugs coming into the country, as well with the tariffs, meaning more folks or more manufacturers build facilities here, less tariffs. If they put more drugs on Trump RX, they also can be relieved of some of those tariffs as well. And in the document, it's very interesting. I don't know if anyone's read it. It's pretty long. It's okay if you haven't. He actually calls out the manufacturers that have been unwilling to partner with him to date. It's very interesting. Like, blatant. He's like, these ones are all good, these ones are all bad. Literally has them on 2 pages. It's kind of fascinating, but the whole point is he wants folks to bring their facilities into the country. The thing that we worry about and we wonder is, just because they bring them into the U.S. doesn't necessarily mean they're more cost effective, meaning less costly for you. Our labor typically is more expensive. So what does that do does it drive actual costs up? Again, too soon to know, but that's the one thing that I worry about more than anything else. So. Okay, I covered a lot. I tried to stay sort of on time. I could talk about pharmacy literally for hours, but any questions on anything that we touched on?
I think for me, as I sit here as a consumer or someone that is going to be under these plans, it's always understanding healthcare is, what about me? How does this impact me? And as a board, I care about how this impacts the cost for the district in totality, but also how does this benefit our employees in the plan? And that's the part, like, show me the money, like, show me the numbers.
Yep.
But that's the question that I have.
Yeah, so the renewal, so the one thing that we can do with regards to the financials, so initially, we renewed the contract, that was about 146,000 roughly. We can add that on top of the other, I think it was 490 or 462. So we're right around 600,000 in terms of total savings. The one thing about savings with regards to pharmacy or anything of healthcare is it's a snapshot in time. So unfortunately, it's not like a check that I can just write and say, hey, you're going to save $600,000. If all your claims and all your members were exactly the same, there's savings, significant savings there. What we're trying to do is, kind of to Darren's point, is make sure that you have the best contract possible and the best minimum rebates and minimum discounts that exist. And what that does is basically sets your floor. So you can never go below that, because if the PBM goes below, they true you up to that amount. So we're really pushing the envelope to make sure that those minimum rebate guarantees or the minimum discounts are as high as possible, along with the other, I'll say, like, gray area with regards to the contract, make sure that stuff is aligned. When you have higher discounts, that results in lower cost to your members at the point of sale. And then the rebates, I know a lot of folks will say, well, the members never really get the rebate. Well, it's not that they don't get the rebate, they just get it more on the back end when you're setting a premium, for instance. So what the member pays into that. Again, spidey senses would tell me rebates, well, they're not going to go away. They're just going to look a little different. They may all sort of be point of sale, which ultimately would lower people's costs at the point of sale, meaning at the pharmacy. The hard part there is that only impacts the folks that are taking the drug, not necessarily everyone else. So then other people that may be healthy, they're actually subsidizing some of those other folks because they're not getting it on the back end with regards to the premium.
Yep. Any other questions? I do want to keep us somewhat on track because we've got a further discussion on this coming. Dr. Piasek?
Sorry, I do just have one thing. When I think about, I could talk about pharmacy all day too, but in the interest of
We should
everybody
chat.
else, I will not. Yeah, we can
I
hang out
had a
afterwards.
feeling that you two might actually hit it off.
I think the analysis is really fascinating, and I appreciate the expertise and the perspective that you bring to all of this. And I think, everybody has a thing that they want to offer, right? And where they're going to be better than the other guy. I think what this Kozlowski said about we want to balance the cost against what this truly is a benefit, right? But for many people, it's essential, right? It's a benefit that we provide as an employer, but the percentage of Americans who require a prescription medication or a prescription device is very, very high. So when I think about the process, the incentives to those PBMs, the potential for delays, and the overall outcomes, like what is the approval, what are the pre-authorization timelines, because the big dissatisfiers for the employees or the consumers are how many hours am I going to spend on the phone, how long is it going to take to process this, and when we're talking about biologics or we're talking about essential life-saving devices in some cases, CGMs or other things, like we need to work with a partner who is not kicking cans on things as their model, as their default model, but understanding that there's going to be a certain percentage of high-cost biologics that people need. And so when we tell them, oh, this this has been denied, or we need another authorization, or you've got to wait 90 days, or and then the effect is lost. I think I care as much about that as I do, the cost side, probably more about that, right? We should pay more to make sure that we're not it's not inconveniencing, it's really a quality of life issue that we need to be thoughtful about.
Yeah, it's actually, it's a really good point, and it's something I didn't really touch on, but when we do the evaluation of all of these PBMs, so the 4 PBMs, holding them all accountable, so we actually send them a workbook, and it's almost like I won't say like a dating guide, but in a way, it's like asking all these really in-depth questions to understand what they're all about. So to your point, like, well, what is their PA approval rate? And it's really a fine line, because you don't want a PBM that approves everything, because that's not necessarily good either. And, not all physicians write a prescription correctly, based on FDA guidelines. They just don't. And so that's where a PBM can come in. But you also don't want a PBM to reject everything either. So it's really a fine line. And we actually we've built that into our model now to be able to incorporate what a PA approval rate is based on certain indications. And, if you were to backtrack like 15 years ago, the way that a PBM would operate and price a deal is basically giving, to your point, you basically give them everything underneath the sun, every product, every service. They didn't really care that it impacted a member. They just wanted to get to a lowest price point, because there wasn't somebody on the back end that could truly evaluate the deal like we can, and there are many others that do this too. But I would say that we do a really good job of vetting all those things out and making sure that it's a balance between price, service, so not only for Darren and Kristen, but also for the members. And then on the clinical kind of component of it, it's like, the evolution of what you're doing clinically for a member. And I think that's where the business is evolving now, is like, well, what are you going to do for those high-risk members that you weren't doing 10 years ago? It just wasn't really being asked of them. But now you have to do that. It's kind of like a table stake in a way. And making sure that they're getting those drugs more quickly, because a lot of the specialty drugs, you need those pretty much instantly. You can't wait a week or 2 weeks or a month to get them, but they are very high cost. So it's very much a balance, but it's all stuff that we evaluate in the process too. So we try to take the guesswork out of it, I guess you could say. Like, it's not last year I had this happen to me, or 2 years ago. It's like we try to make it very black and white. And then I think I jokingly said this to Kristen and Darren when we first started. I'm like, my job isn't to make the decision for you. My job is to educate and empower you guys to make the decision. And really, when you look at it, all the details will kind of shine themselves through, and kind of the one PBM will stand out from the rest. I mean, that's typically what happens. And I think that's what happened here too. But good call out. We should definitely talk more. So. Nobody ever gets excited about pharmacy, so now the fact that you are, that's appealing. Anybody else?
Yes, I'm a nerd. Anyways.
No, I think we're good.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen, we only have one more slide deck
I'll
to
stay
do there.
Do you want me to stay next to you for support?
Okay, you got a game.
And you're welcome to stay.
I'll stay, it's fine, I don't mind.
Yes, we'll transition over. So as I mentioned at last month's FNF, we were finalizing what the plan design recommendation would be for 26, 27. And I actually thought it was good that Dennis came tonight, because in my mind, this is, RX has become a conversation in and of itself recently, and I'm connecting, here we go. So it ended up fitting. I had originally thought I would bring Dennis in, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to the presentation, because I thought it was important that you know how important the RX side of it is, and the steps we're taking to try to educate ourselves as much as possible and make sound decisions for that savings. And keep in mind that savings also shared by the employees. They have some stake in the game as well as a self-funded program. So I'll talk a little bit more now about the medical side, our health plan, and what our renewal is looking like, and a recommendation that we're making to the committee. We do not need action. We would, we always prefer action sooner if we can for planning purposes, but we also know this is a large topic, obviously, impacting a lot of our staff. So here's just a snapshot of our health plan in February. Just to give you scale, I don't know, we don't generally talk about it in this form or fashion. Normally we talk about a rate increase or things like that. So we have a total of just over 1,100 employees enrolled. We have a wage-based plan, which is a requirement that we offer under
Affordable Care Act.
Affordable Care Act, thank you. So some staff do take that, but the bulk of our employees fall into the high deductible health plan, and that's a plan design that we've had for probably close to 10 years, if not 10 years. And then there's the breakout between single and family, but in total, we insure 3,000 lives. At mid-plan year, and I'll touch on that in the next slide, our medical claims were $8.8 million and RX was $2.1 million, to provide you some scale of what's happening this year. Our actual plan year is not on our fiscal year. Our plan year actually runs 9/1 through 8/31 on the school year. What makes that hard is we do open enrollment in May. We're looking at trying to seal up a renewal in February, and we're looking at about 4 months, 3 months of claims data to use, because we're self-funded, so every year is different, and just like the RX, everything's different, the care is different, the claims are different. So it's not an ideal situation, but it's also helpful to have that plan year for teachers and aides and in our main hiring season. Our current total monthly premium, single is $890 and family is just over $2,000. Our premium copay, meaning what does the employee and employer pay? If staff participate in our wellness program, which is primarily a health risk assessment annually for the employee and their spouse, if they're both covered, it's 88% district paying the premium, 12% employee, and for staff who do not participate in the wellness program, it's 78% for the employer, and 22% paid by the employee. And our projected net claims costs for the program itself is between $20 and $21 million, to provide you some scale as to how big our health plan really is. The next several slides, I'm not going to read through them. This is really kind of a list that Kristen and I have kept going over the years, because you forget about the changes you made several years ago. So not all this is health insurance related, it's all benefits related. You can see in 17-18 was our first year we were with Navitus, for example. We used to have a high deductible health plan with an HSA contribution by the district. We got rid of that a few years later as a cost savings measure. 19 through 2021, again, we reduced the health plan deductible that year and got rid of the HSA contribution. So it's just, the reason I show all these years is this is a constant conversation with us, and Dennis is newer to the conversation, but we've used our other consultants to help us navigate the changes that have taken place. In 21-22, we added the Navitus Specialty Access drug program for high cost RX costs then. That was a great program, saved us a couple $1 million over the life of it, but like all these things, they come and go. And that specialty savings program has kind of been replaced by a different approach by some of the PBMs, but it was a great decision at the time. Also related to the clinic, we left the hospital and we have our Sunset location now to go along with the Brookfield location in 22-23. A whole list of things in 23-24. One thing I will point out, when we talk about it here a little bit at the second to last, when I talk about health insurance information, I'm assuming a full-time employee. We have proration with aid staff and things like that, which could eat up an hour in and of itself. So when we're talking today, it's what's the average full-time employee paying. As we just went through, PRISM came on in 24-25 and helped us through that process. We also added the employee RX kiosk offering for $2 at the employee health clinic. And then no deductible increases in 25-26 because we did a larger one the prior year, so we didn't have to move with the federal mandates in that year. I did put together, it's a separate handout, and I actually gave you a hard copy of the handout because sometimes I think it's just good to hold something in your hands. to go through the plan design changes in terms of how we normally look at, or I think how people normally consume their health insurance summaries. So I started out with the annual deductible. I went back to 1920, it's 7 years of plan design. We've had several increases in the single and family deductible over that period of time, but as I footnoted at the bottom, 78% of that deductible increase was federally mandated. That was not the school district of Waukesha implementing those changes. The only time we did was in 24-25. We went a little above what was already going to be an IRS increase, and that allowed us not to increase it in 25-26. So really, if you consider or factor in the inflationary rate of healthcare, I think our growth in what the deductible has been over the last 7 years has not been out of line in any form or fashion. And really, the purpose of this document is to really highlight how few of things we've changed in the last 7 years, which in healthcare is a tremendous amount of time. So the premium copays are the same percentages they've been, 12 and 88% for people with the wellness. We've utilized the UHC network since 1920, meaning providers are very stable. Down at the bottom, plan design, we've stayed with the high deductible health plan, which is also HSA eligible. And again, the deductible changes weren't driven necessarily by us. The areas I want to kind of draw your attention to, and then we'll touch on it in the slide deck. In the middle of the page where you have that gray box, proposed options. The proposed option we're rolling out does not change the deductible for the 26-27 school year. And there's two options of what this recommendation could take. And then down at the bottom is a co-insurance change that we'll be talking about in a little more detail. But I thought this was a nice summary to really highlight the efforts that we've taken to stabilize our health insurance plan for the last 7 years. If you recall, during the high inflationary years, we really took some unique steps to hold down wages, and we kind of took the approach of let's stabilize the health plan during those years, because we were doing stipends and the CPI was at 8% and all of those things. And I think that held true to what we were planning to do, but I think it's important for people to realize that this has not been a drastic change year after year in the school district of Waukesha. So we transitioned to the budgetary part of this, and when I do a budget projection every January for the committee, I for years have been saying, let's assume that the district will take on a 5% growth in premium. Anything above that would mandate changes to the health plan that obviously the board would end up approving. That doesn't mean we would stop at 5% if that was the goal of the conversations in and of that year. It's just the number you have to be able to project out. And there's been years where we've had zero premium increase in the last 7 years that certainly met that threshold or goal. So we're going to get into co-insurance. So I thought I should answer the most basic question. Is the deductible included in the maximum out of pocket? Because that's what we're going to start talking about here in a few minutes. And keep in mind that when we're looking at maximum out of pocket of numbers, that's not standalone. The deductible is inside that maximum out of pocket calculation, just so anyone who may be watching or listening to this understands that clearly. So what's our plan? And we've touched on it with Dennis's presentation. How are we going to get down to within what our projected budget parameter is? And obviously the improved PBM contract will provide better pricing and savings, not only to us, but to our employees or to our health program. The other thing it does, and we'll talk about it, and it's outlined in this document I shared, we're recommending that a 90% co-insurance benefit be established for in-network Tier 1 and in-network non-Tier 1 claims. I wish they would just call them Tier 1 and Tier 2 for simplicity's sake, but they don't. Currently, if you're in network in a Tier 1 provider, once you hit your deductible, you're done. You're covered at 100% for all other health cost claims. And I think consumerism is one of the things we need to think about as we're talking about this. But the claims that are already in network for a non-Tier 1 provider, is already at 9%. So really what we're talking about is a change for that threshold. And what's the difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2? UHC goes through and they grade their physicians to either be, I don't know if most efficient or best functioning doctors versus doctors they don't deem to be that. So one of the challenges, just looking through Kristen's lens, is employees now could start with a in-network Tier 1 provider, and UHC could change their designation to non-Tier 1 mid-year. So she'll get calls saying, hey, I thought I was capped at the deductible, and we're like, well, we don't control who's identified in Tier 1 or Tier 2. You're now going to the higher deductible that's in place for that. And I know this is a lot of.
But on this particular topic, I think this was the number one complaint from our employees, because they do the research to make sure that they're following a tier, and then all of a sudden, without them being notified that that is changing, they are continuing service, and then they're getting
Yeah.
the higher deductible.
Yeah.
Which is, quite honestly, for me, that was very bizarre to see. I think I've had twice in my entire piece where I've gotten a notice that said, we have covered your experience this time, but going forward, this doctor is no longer considered in-network for you. What I'm hearing is that our staff does not get that. And so without them almost having to follow up each time that they go, and that is a significant pain point. I think of all of the listening sessions, that was the loudest part that I heard. I understand the cost piece, and I think, quite honestly, the proposed plans that you're doing here actually help a bit to alleviate some of that inconsistency or noise within that, that I appreciate. But yeah, I just wanted to interject that, because the employee experience just on who's in what tier is,
Is that probably your most common?
It happens a
Question.
lot, especially with people taking their children. Like, they don't want to have their kid going to a different doctor every month because the tier changes and they're getting a
Agreed.
bill. They
Yeah.
feel like they don't know what they're going to pay out of pocket.
Yeah, the bill's really the notification, right? And that's sad. It's at the end of the process.
Mr. Rudd.
Yeah, just clarifying. So a non-tier 1 is still in network. They're just a different level
Yeah.
of network
So
provider.
a tier 1 in-network, you pay the deductible only. If it's an in-network non-tier 1, you pay the deductible and
plus
then
the
10% co-insurance until you meet the out-of-pocket maximum.
Okay,
And then there's a whole out-of-network
correct.
as well. Which
So I heard that providers can be moved from tier 1 to non-tier 1 mid-year. Can they be moved in and out of network as well?
They
mid-year?
could, but United Healthcare is a very large network.
Sure.
I have not received the complaint in the 5 years that I've been here of somebody being in network and then out of network. It's
Okay.
just been in network tier 1 or in network non-tier 1.
Okay, thank you.
But they could.
So we would bring a stable benefit level to the in-network doctors by creating a 90% co-insurance regardless of tier 1 and, I was gonna say tier 2, and non-tier 1 doctors. What we would put in place is where we get into the in-network out-of-pocket maximum. Right now, in-network, as I said, is $1,800 and $3,600. That's the deductible. So there is no co-insurance for a in-network tier 1 physician. The in-network non-tier 1 maximum out-of-pockets are $3,725 for single or $7,450 for a family plan. We're recommending a uniform maximum out-of-pocket. We have two options here, and you can really name the numbers, but we're looking at either a $2,500, $5,000, single family, or a $3,000, $6,000 single family maximum out-of-pocket. So for people who are in tier 1, they would see an increase out of their maximum out-of-pocket, but then the people who are in the non-tier 1 level would actually see a decline in their maximum out-of-pocket. I guess we were trying to hit the midpoint in those numbers, but we're open to feedback on any of this, and this is really why, though action tonight would be great for our planning purposes, that, if this comes back in May, we're more than welcome to have a follow-up conversation, but that was the overall structure. And I try to display that in this document as well, so you can kind of see how this would flow. So I think it's also important to highlight what doesn't change in this recommendation. There would be no change in the deductible for the 26-27 school year. We maintain the high deductible health plan design. The provider networks would be unchanged. The plan is still health savings account eligible, or HSA, a more common phrase, I guess. We had, and I should have mentioned, I don't think I did, we had listening sessions in fall with staff. Carrie attended several of them, and just kind of really was more educating people on our health plan, and laying out what plans other districts around us or other clients of the consultants we brought in are dealing with. So I think the HSA, surprisingly, for the low level of participation, the people who are doing it really love the HSA. So, and I think there's value to the HSA myself. Premium copay percentages are unchanged. So again, all we're changing is that maximum out-of-pocket exposure to staff. I also think it's important, and this gets into the consumerism part of it, that we talk about the options that are available to employees to save on their own health insurance costs. The biggest one is the employee health clinic offering. We've done so many marketing approaches to that. We can't get the kind of growth there that we would anticipate, especially when you're offering $2 RX. We had a presentation a while ago now, but I think all the board was pretty intrigued by that. Virtual or in-person visits. When you can get to your deductible with $3,600 with the family, I think the level of interest in going to our employee health clinic is diminished. You hit that threshold where you don't have to be a true consumer anymore. So I think that's important to point out. And then I included off of our employee benefit guide, which I included in board docs, so you can see our overall offering. This scale here of why we want people to go to either e-visits or the health clinic, so staff can share in the savings of this offering, which I think is very strong when it comes to an employee clinic. We offer the wellness premium copay reduction, which I showed in the earlier slide. There's some staff that do not complete that, or their spouse chooses not to complete that. That's their decision. I'm not saying we should mandate that. But there's that option as well in terms of offsetting any potential cost increase related to this recommendation. We offer countless specialty programs to manage specific health. Diabetes is probably the biggest one that we try to draw people to. These are all offerings, weight loss, and all kinds of them now, I lose track, that are offered to help lower people's costs and then, more importantly, improve their health. And then we offer the HSA contributions to be done through payroll. It's just a lot easier for everyone if it's just naturally sent to the bank rather than trying to go to the bank and make a deposit directly. Items to consider, and I've probably highlighted or talked about these a little bit. We're fighting an 8 to 10% trend on average in health insurance costs every year, just through health insurance inflation or medical cost inflation. And we've done a lot of things. We've done the specialty drug. We've brought in PBM, RFP. We've done little things around the edges. And I would say that for the last 7 years, we've pretty much held solid our health plan that's being offered to staff. And at some point, you simply you can't do that anymore. Our current projection had us at about an 8% renewal, so we're trying to fight our way down to at least 5% and preferably more. With the PBM change and the savings from that process and the recommended plan design changes, we would be within our budget projection or assumption for health insurance. A couple more months of claim data and we can really fine tune what that number really is, but we don't have that again because of the timing. Again, the uniform co-insurance level, I think, would clarify a lot of things and a lot of questions that we receive and make it simpler for staff, because out of those listening sessions, I think it was very interesting how little people knew about all the offerings within our health insurance program. So to simplify it, I think there is some value. And lastly, I think our investment in the employee health clinic has been a sound benefit to offer staff. Is it a huge savings for us at this point? I don't think it is. I don't think it costs us anything. It's a benefit you're offering. But I think a big part of why that growth isn't there is there's no consumer-driven part to our health plan to make people think twice of, well, why don't I get that 90-day or longer prescription filled for $2 when I can just go to CVS or wherever because I've met my deductible for the year. So that's what we have. Again, we're here to answer any questions, but really the consumerism is a big part of it, I think. I think something needs to be done, and when we looked at the plans during our listening sessions, our health insurance committee, a lot of the plans being adopted by districts around us or other vendors that our consultants work with, it's all consumer driven. It's all, some of them are, there is no deductible, you're just gonna pay co-insurance forever, but you have an app where you can find out where a procedure is the cheapest to have it done, and the technology is certainly making that all possible in this day and age. So that's our rationale, and like I said, we're here to answer any questions you may have about either our thought process or the plan design change itself.
Mr. Harland?
So a couple of questions kind of around some comments you had made. The wellness program, is that only available for those individuals in the high deductible, or is that for both the wage base and the high deductible?
So anybody can do it, but the cost savings is only for the high deductible because the wage base has to be affordable under the Affordable Care Act, so we don't adjust that premium at all. It's based on the federal poverty line.
Okay. And I think that one of you had made a comment that we have a low participation. Do we know what percent of the 1,100 plans are participating in that?
I can get that number for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
would
pretty high. There's
it's-
not many people not doing
I
it.
would say it's like a 90-10.
Yeah, it's pretty high.
Okay. I was just looking back at the new hire. Is there a page that then we're coaching the employees who are not participating on it to go through, these are the steps that you need to participate in? Because I guess I don't necessarily see that spelled out in the
Yeah, so
benefits
I work
guide.
with the clinic on scheduling all the HRAs, and we do 2 Saturdays at the clinic, and then we pick 10 different school locations. And we have them in October and November. So I start communicating it out in the Explorer to all staff. They get flyers, information. It shows them the cost savings if they participate versus not participate, and then all the steps of how to do it. They enroll through My Chart. So the day that it opens, My Chart opens up for them to register. So I think it's pretty high participation. I think a lot of people understand the process, and if they don't, they'll email me.
Yeah, and then when new employees come in, we meet with them to go
Yeah.
through benefits.
We do 3 sessions over summer to capture all the new hires and go over the HRA and participating. And all new hires, when they're hired, from now through August, we don't make them do that right at their hiring point. We just say, why do it now? We're going to enroll you in the wellness plan right away. You're going to start on 9/1. And then if you don't do the HRA in fall, we're going to change you to the non-wellness premiums in January.
Okay.
So,
And then I guess similar is kind of the participation on the HSA program. What does that look like from a,
off the top of my head, I thought it was like 53%, and we thought it was going to be a lot higher. But I do have it in our committee slide deck I can pull up.
I guess while you're pulling that one up, kind of to your last point on the kiosk, I again, go back to the guide, I mean, I don't necessarily see where it calls out that kiosk specifically. I see the e-visits, but is that kind of where individuals are not necessarily connecting the $2 prescriptions with it?
Yeah, with the kiosks, it's a lot of internal communications, whether it's the Explorer or sometimes we're on the admin committees. We have the Soups Advisory Committee where we push these things. So I think there's a general knowledge that's offered there. But we just can't seem to get the participation numbers to budge as much as I would hope.
I think part of the problem initially is you had to have a visit at the clinic and spend $30. So you already went to your doctor, now you have to go again. So people look at it as 2 appointments, 2 schedules, 2 payments. And the clinic has been working through that whole process.
Yep.
And so they have waived it, but they can't, the whole drive-up piece we were trying to figure out so people could treat it like Walgreens and just drive up to get it. That is the red tape with getting a prescription from your car, not really at a pharmacy.
Got it.
So that piece is still kind of being worked out.
Mr. Wad?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the actual cost to the district versus the employees on the premiums under the current plan. So if I'm understanding this correctly, a employee needing a family plan would pay 12% of the $2,015.45 a month. That's the total premium amount. And the employee, okay, so an employee with family is paying $241.80 a month, right? And if they, and that's with wellness, and without wellness, it's $443.40 a month. That's, okay, thank you. Withhold comment.
So that's monthly amount, and then we have some people. On 19 checks, 20 checks, and 24 checks.
So we're talking the standard full-time 24
Yeah,
check
and that's a
person.
40-hour week person, then we have 30.
Sure, so when I,
39, and-
yeah, so when I say monthly, I understand
Yeah.
that may not show up as a monthly payment depending upon that pay cycle, but,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
It's 58% of employees put money in their HSA. 58%.
58.
And just to clarify, we do not contribute anything to the HSA ourselves, correct?
No, it's strictly voluntary. All we do is process it for them.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Piasek?
Just to follow on Mr. Wad's line of clarification, so with that, which falls within the deductible, those premiums, what you're saying?
They do
Did you
not.
say that earlier? Okay, yeah. So on top of, plus, so if I'm currently in network with $3,600 deductible for a family, the out-of-pocket, if I'm in network, is met also, max out-of-pocket.
For tier 1, yeah.
For Tier 1.
How often is this changing between tier 1 and tier 2 happening? Do we know how common that is?
I don't have a number for that.
I am concerned about, those who are dealing with either chronic illnesses with children or for themselves are going to hit that out-of-pocket max pretty easily because it's so low. Relatively speaking, like if you look in other industries, it's just so low. So shifting that out-of-pocket max that way would have an impact on those people who are currently in network. And would have a significant advantage to people who are having out of network. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with the uniform max out of pocket. I understand why you want to go there. I just wonder, not knowing, and I think you're modeling it based on how to kind of meet our budgetary goals, right? But that'll be a significant advantage to, I think, what's probably a smaller percentage of people who are out of network, max out of pocket. But will have a big impact. Again, relatively speaking, it's low out of pocket max. But for those who are hitting that out of pocket max, that's a big number. And does that incentivize using the other resources that we have? Because I think that's your hypothesis. But how do we coach people through that? And do we have analyses that can show, you know, if you're on, I don't know, name a common one. I don't know. But can we show that by going through kiosk or other benefits, the employee health clinic, you're less likely to hit that out-of-pocket max? I just think that's going to fall as a pretty big impact to people who are accustomed to exceeding that max. And because it's so low, I think it's probably getting hit early in the year by people who are dealing with chronic illnesses. It's going to hit them early in the year.
Yeah, we don't have data that tells me that besides my belief in human nature. If it's free, I'm not going to be an
Of
active
course.
participant in it. I don't have anything beyond that.
So I am going through the enrollment process in 3 different companies right now. One is a 24% increase, one is a 36% increase, and the other one is a 17% increase. And I understand Dr. Piasek said other industries, but we are looking at deductibles that are single 5,000, family 10,000, family 15,000. And we want to support our employees and make sure that we're giving them access to great coverage. But at the same point, we have enabled and built so many great tools and opportunities that would save them personally hundreds of dollars. And we aren't getting them to utilize that. And part of the healthcare model these days is personal accountability and having to research and take care of your own healthcare and be a prudent, Mr. Clark, to your consumer, being able to do that. And so there's a piece to me that says, when I listen to the employee feedback on how frustrating it is to not understand what their costs are if their doctor goes in and out of tier, knowing that many of the families hit their deductible, I think that we learned that in there too, is most people are hitting their deductible. And then it's not, I don't want to say a free-for-all,
Yeah.
but the lack of accountability and caring on how much this is costing the district, and ultimately it comes back around. I have a hard time with not trying to assess on how do you kindly pull in the partnership between the employer and the employee, and how many years does the employer have to absorb the rising costs? Having costs that we're seeing here in the district that we're thinking this is only going up 9%, and that is incredibly low, but we're at a point where we have to share. We can't continue to absorb everything. And I think the benefits here overall are so good that finding a way, I think with these tiered structures between the tier 1 and the non-tier 1 and the confusion, I like the way, Mr. Clark, you've done this so that it effectively removes the noise from them and not knowing if the doctor is going to somehow fall in, fall out, go through this, but also addressing the fact that there is a co-share that employees and employers have to take. So, I'm looking at kind of the markups on this, and I don't think these are unreasonable from a request and where they're going.
And I totally get the, offering a strong benefit and supporting our staff, but that's why I created the history. Because we often look at it as a snapshot today from last year or this year to next year, I guess, in this conversation. and we forget about the historical. And I would argue that this, for any fair person looking at this, would say we've had 7 years of supporting our health insurance program. But when you're battling potentially double-digit inflationary factors, at some point, there has to be a change. And I think bringing consumerism, there is a value to that. We've done the math, Kristen and I have gone round and round on this, and I certainly get the sentiment, but I don't think we're moving fast enough if we do $200 adjustments.
I agree.
So
Mr. Wadd?
Thank you. So I'm probably going to irritate some people with this comment, but I'm going to make it because I believe it's true. The first thing that I need to say is we need to remember who it is that's paying for our employees' benefits. It's the taxpayer. And I don't begrudge any benefit that we've provided, and I think it's great that we have been able to, up to this point, provide this kind of coverage, these kinds of deductibles, these kinds of copays. However, when I think about the taxpayer who is helping to pay these plans, I would be willing to wager that there is less than 5% of the population who gets their health insurance from their employer who has deductibles this low, that have out-of-pocket costs this low, and that see the limited increase in premiums that we have been able to provide for our employees here. I work for one of the largest banks in the country. I have a $12,000 out-of-pocket max for in-network. I pay not quite twice, but I pay more than those who don't go through the wellness visit for my insurance premiums, which means I am paying thousands and thousands of dollars more for my health insurance than the employees of this district. And again, I don't want to begrudge that. I'm glad that we've been able to do that to this point. But the simple fact of the matter is that when we're talking about the types of increases in costs, but we're as a district absorbing those instead of passing them along, we're doing a disservice to those who are paying for those benefits outside of the premiums and the out-of-pocket that the employee is. And I think that when we ask the employees to pay more, we are not asking for something unreasonable. I think it is a reasonable sacrifice to ask our employees to pay a little bit more to ensure that the contributions that the taxpayers are making to fund it are fair and are closer to what their reality is when it comes to health insurance in their day-to-day lives.
So this is set as a discussion, possible action. I'm not sure I'm hearing from the committee tonight that we're ready to act on these. So I guess then I would ask the committee, it's what else do we want to see? I know Dr. Piasek had a couple requests on some data. I don't know if we can gather, but I would have to align with Mr. Wadd that these proposals do not seem unreasonable to me. I am personally not opposed to either one of them. I actually think it makes things a little bit easier for the actual employee to not have to worry about a doctor falling in and out. But it also does put accountability in, and when you have skin in the game and have to pay a share of healthcare expenses, the general following is that you're more prudent with the expenses that go through that, which benefits not only the districts and what we can put back into the classrooms, but also the overall usage of the program. All right, I would say at this point, we'll add it to the agenda for next month for possible action. We could talk about additional things that we'd like to see just to move the needle, but I would agree that there has to be some additional support coming from the employees. Any other comments, discussion from the committee?
Just maybe a clarification, I know we're way over time, but if we're going to bring it back in May, what information would be coming back? Because I don't know that there's a need or an advantage. We will have new committees set when we return. So that may kind of get us back to learning process.
That's a fair point.
And I'm trying to balance, right, there's an added cost for those who are hitting the max out of pocket in network, but there's a significant benefit to those who are hitting the max out of pocket out of network. And I think it's been modeled to be within our budgeted boundaries. But I think there's a lot of education that has to come along with it. So I guess I don't know what we would be seeing if we're coming back in May that's going to change anything, other than, for me, maybe just understanding the differences between these two thresholds and how that impacts.
Which is what you requested.
But is that going to help us get to the number, or is there a number that's being proposed already? I think you offered two options, but they're very similar. So I don't know what the difference is of the impact of those two options. And if we did, would it be better? Because I think you might. Darren, I think you, right, may know what that overall projected
Yeah,
cost or benefit is to the district.
The delta between option A and B is about $250,000 to $300,000 a year. I don't remember the specific number, but in that range.
It was about 1,159,000 for the 3,000, 6,000, or 847,000 for the other option.
And so we know how many people or percentage that are putting money into an HSA. Do we know how many are hitting the max out of pocket?
That, I don't think we have that number.
Okay.
That's a number we could bring back.
And just to clarify, if I could, under either A or B, along with the PBM changes, we would get back underneath or at or below the targeted 5% increase.
Yeah, I would put the range, again, we need a couple more, preferably about 3 more months of claims data. We'd be at about a 2 to 4% increase in the premium.
And when does this decision need to be made by? What's our?
We really need it to be made in May because we have open enrollment before the staff leaves for the school year. Otherwise, during the summer, it's hard to, not that you can't run open enrollment during the summer, but it's a different animal.
I understand.
Could you have that information by Wednesday by any chance?
We could make that request.
I think it may be worth advancing the proposal to the full board so that we have the opportunity to take action there if we have that information that could fill in the gaps. I guess that's where I'm at.
Would the full board be able to make any requests to change those? It would have to still come back to committee, correct?
I mean, I think when the board is convened and we're taking action on a topic, that anything is possible, yeah. I know there's been a lot of work that's been put into this, and so my concern is if we're resetting committees,
And be
we
restarting
may
the
be
conversation.
restarting the conversation, although I would expect everybody to be as reasonably informed as possible. So maybe it's just a mix.
So in saying that, go ahead, Mr. Rod.
I just wanted to clarify, when you say advanced proposal, are you picking one of the two on here? Or just saying someone might want to propose or advance one of the two proposals?
Right, that could be done, and I know that Mrs. Kozlowski spent a lot of time working with the administrative team and listening to the staff feedback session, so I sense that she has a comfort level with the recommendation that's based on
Correct.
what the administration thinks is budgetarily feasible. And I respect and value that. I just, I don't want to be in a situation where we're restarting.
No, and I actually think that's a great point. I would prefer actually if we were voting on this tonight, but I don't think we have comfort from all of the committee members to be able to do that. So pending some of the other data requests on numbers of who's enrolled and whatnot, and Darren, I can help with that to bring that as just additional things to put on the board feedback.
No, we built, well, I have to say, I didn't think of the new committee structures, but we built our timeline was built around the board probably wanting 2 meetings on this. So going into May, besides the reconfiguration of committees potentially, this is absolutely fine.
Okay. Well, that may just need to be an expectation as we reset the committees then.
Any other discussions? Okay, so this moves to the full board.
Well,
I'm sorry? Wouldn't we have to make a motion to approve something for it to go to the full
And
board?
I'm saying we're going to discuss it at the full board. I wasn't going any further
Oh,
than that
okay,
it's
okay, you're not
to be
saying,
discussed.
it would not be an action item for the full board. Okay, thank you.
All right, we are going to go quite long. The next item for this evening is the monthly budget report.
I'll try to be short and sweet here. There is a memo that I provided in board docs. So that's just providing a brief update on a shift in our financial reporting schedule. To ensure the highest level of accuracy and data integrity in our financial presentations, the business office is going to be transitioning to a 1-month lag for regular budget updates. Previously, our goal was to report on the month immediately preceding the committee meeting. So for example, typically I'd be presenting on March financials tonight. However, because our meetings often occur within the first few business days of the month, our month-end close is frequently still underway. This timing carries the potential for presenting incomplete data requiring subsequent reconciliations. So our new reporting structure I will present the finalized March financials at the May meeting, April finalized at our June meeting, and so on. But please feel free to reach out to me prior to our next meeting if you have any specific questions regarding this transition. I would like to do a brief March financial status summary. In regards to revenue status, in Fund 10, we received approximately $381,000 of property taxes from the city of Waukesha in March, which was our largest source of local revenue. For state sources, our equalization aid came in for $14.5 million. For Fund 27 revenue, we received our state special education categorical aid payment of $1.58 million. Additionally, we also received Medicaid payments in the amount of $47,000. Revenue collections for both Fund 10 and Fund 27 remain on track with budget. Expenditures in purchase services, pupil travel in Fund 10 was roughly $1 million. I plan to review this amount in more detail. But on the surface level, it appears most of this balance is simply a result of invoice timing. Overall, our spending for Fund 10 year-to-date came out at 49.92% of the approved budget. Last year at this time, we were at 50.1%. And for Fund 27, we have spent 64.76% of our budget compared to 62.7% this time last year. Just to reiterate, our full financial report for the month of March will be presented at the May Finance and Facilities meeting. Then I also wanted to just mention that there's a really great article out in the Freeman in the commentary section because as of Wednesday, April 1st, we made our final principal payment, bringing the school district to zero debt. So that's all I had for tonight.
That article's in board docs too, both the F&F and the board, so everyone can see it.
Not many districts can say that. Well
Very
done.
exciting.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Why are you apologizing?
With the, so doing the final financials with the 1-month lag, I do think it's important that we stay on pace with some of that. So did I hear you say correctly that there may be like, will there be an interim comment, or is there anything? like
Yeah,
the
so I
most
w-
recent month that you would,
Yeah, I would kind of plan to do what I did tonight with the financial summary,
Okay.
just highlighting any key items of
Okay.
note, and then just to give that brief breakdown, just to call out any sort of summarized items for the month.
so there's no surprises when we're looking at the vouchers and
But
things like
but
that?
the vouchers are current month. So that will still be,
We're required to do that statutorily. Sorry.
Otherwise, like, this month with Good Friday and everything, we're asked to, and we didn't have Fiber Network Thursday, and all of a sudden show up, when we were actually talking about it, I'd asked Carrie about it prior to that. I think you'll just get a better report, give us a little more time to analyze some things with the month lag, because it can fall awful early in the month, and we're just kind of scrambling, and eventually we just have to run a report with maybe cash receipts haven't been inputted, and because it takes some time to go through all that.
and this is normal cadence of
Correct.
most businesses. And
Yes.
so, in talking with other districts as well, is trying to navigate that.
Correct.
All right, is there any other discussion or comments? Okay, moving on to other business, are there any recommendations for future committee meetings? Okay, seeing none, we do have a need to adjourn to executive session. Mr. Harland?
I motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent E, for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, and this is in regards to the Oakdale property.
All right, it's been motioned by Mr. Harlan, second by Mrs. Voigt. Tanya, can you take the roll call?
Mrs. Kozlowski?
Aye.
Mr. Harlan?
Aye.
Dr. Piasek?
Aye.
Mr. Wad?
Aye.
Mrs. Voigt?
Aye.
All right, we are officially in closed session, and we will reconvene. Okay, we are reconvening to make a motion on possible sale of Oakdale property. Mr. Wad?
Yes, I would move to approve the sale of the Oakdale property. Tax keys WAKC 1360198, WAKC 137002002, and WAKC 1377003 as presented in executive session. Under the terms presented in executive session.
I second.
Okay, it's been motioned by Mr. Wad, seconded by Mrs. Voigt. Tanya, can you take the roll call, please?
Dr. Piasek?
Aye.
Mr. Wad?
Aye.
Mrs. Voigt?
Aye.
Mrs. Kozlowski?
Aye.
And Mr. Harlan?
No.
All right, that concludes our committee meeting for today. We will reconvene next month under new committee terms. Have a good night, everyone.